it's kind of the last official day of COP, and it is early. So we appreciate you all being here, and hello to everyone who is watching from home. I'm buzzed to be hosting this today. I'm buzzed, David.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you.
Well, thank you very much. You don't usually use the word buzzed in the BBC, do you? But there we go. We're not at the BBC now. So to start things off, I mean, it's a wrap on COP. We're not going to be able to cover everything in 45 minutes now, are we? But we are going to be able to give a bit of an overview of what has or hasn't happened, give a bit of flavour of the big topics, and get to know these wonderful panellists. So joining me is David Shukman on my left, climate consultant, presenter, author, and for almost 20 years led the BBC's coverage on the environment, amongst many other things. We also have Alhassan Omar, young climate advocate, and just a generally very impressive background on climate. You started at the age of 12, in fact, and you established Egypt Ability at the age of 19, an NGO focused on nurturing entrepreneurial leaders in Egypt. So we'll go into more on that later. And also, we are joined by Nikita Kanyal, marketing and PR for Extreme Hangout. She's just about to finish her master's, actually, in 2 days' time, I think, Nikita?
Yeah, I'm graduating day after tomorrow.
Fantastic.
There we go.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Love it. In international marketing management, and you've been here since the 3rd of December. So this is our panel. Delighted to be talking to you all today. I am Jess Rogers. I am presenter, commentator, content creator across things like Extreme E, Sail GP, Sky Sports, that type of thing. Sport and sustainability is my bag, and so is spicing up sustainability, which is why I'm here, and using words like buzzing, and David's like, what are you doing? I also am co-founder
I'm with you on the buzzing.
I'm also co-founder of environmental startup Carbon Jacked, where we basically believe that saving the planet shouldn't be boring, and help businesses and individuals creatively combat climate change through getting them out in nature and getting them clued up on climate, and ultimately adding that spice. So anyway, enough of me babbling on. I'm going to kick things off, actually, by asking you, we're not going to do a wrap-up straight away. I'm going to ask you, David, why are you here? Why are you here at COP?
So, as you said, I spent many, many years at the BBC broadcasting to big audiences about climate change, the risks, the solutions. And since I left the BBC, I like to think I've switched from broadcasting to narrowcasting.
Oh, go on
Because
then.
I think if you narrowcast to small groups of key decision makers, you can see something going on in their eyes when you explain the threats and the opportunities. So I've come here to COP as a consultant, as a moderator. You're doing a brilliant job, by the way, already.
Oh, thanks.
And so, yeah, let's give you a round of applause. You're off to a flying start. So I've engaged with a number of organizations, a number of big businesses. I only work with them if I think they're serious about climate change. And so what I've tried to do is just nudge and advocate from within.
Yep, great. Thank you very much. Alhassan, what are you doing here? You live here in Dubai now, don't you?
I
but
do,
originally from Egypt. What are you doing here?
So I'm extremely passionate about combating climate change. At the age of actually 9, I got snuck into a conference by someone, a conference just like this one. It was called Climate Day in Egypt. And I saw a 3D model of the world in 2050 if we did not take action to combat climate change. And my own hometown, Port Said, which is on the Suez Canal, was underwater. And that shook me to my core. Ever since then, I've had a chance to start an NGO in Egypt that I'm happy to talk about later, to develop entrepreneurial leadership in the country. Had the privilege to live and sadly also experience the effects of climate change in South Africa with heat waves in the US, and I've experienced record-breaking blizzards and hurricanes, and in Chile where I got sunburnt because there's no ozone layer above Chile. There's a hole there. And I usually don't get sunburnt. So I'm here because I'm extremely passionate about combating climate change, and specifically, I want to promote the agenda of including more youth activists in corporates to push for combating climate change within these entities.
Amazing. We'll go on to it in a minute, but the fact that you had that profound experience at the age of 9, imagine if we all had that, we could give that to so many people now and the impact it could have. I'll go off on a tangent, so I need to carry on. Nikita, why are you here? I mean, you're at the University of Leeds at the moment, just about to finish. You're originally from India, and you're here working with Extreme Hangout, right?
Yeah, so I'm working in the marketing and PR team with Extreme Hangout, and to be honest, initially I wasn't much aware about, the climate change action that we're talking about today. Obviously, I have seen that around me since long. I live in India, and we have floods, we have heat waves, so we have everything. And I was sympathetic towards it, but I didn't know how to actually, work towards it, put it into action. And thankfully, I landed in Extreme Hangout. And we started doing these local series, moving from countries to countries. And I saw that people are really passionate about it and are willing to do it. And it is an honor that I'm here at COP with the team. And yeah, so I'm actually loving it now.
Oh, amazing. Well, delighted to have you with us and such a great range of panelists today to have a great discussion. I'm going to jump straight in, okay? We're going to go with the F-bomb. Fossil fuels, David. Fossil fuels, okay? We spoke before this panel, a couple of weeks ago, in fact, and we spoke about it being crunch time when it comes to fossil fuels, despite where we're having this conference. Overnight, obviously, we're not quite there in terms of negotiations. There's been tweaks and things to the previous draft. But where are we at? Is it strong enough? Are we having a crackdown on it? Talk to me.
We're right in the battleground. We're right in the battleground. Here we are, we're buzzed, we're optimistic, we're excited to be here. But just a few hundred meters away in the blue zone, feel some sympathy for the negotiators who will have been working night after night. It's like trench warfare. They argue over words, but behind those words are powerful views of the world. And you've got one group of countries really saying, look at the science. We've got to use a lot less fossil fuel because when we use it, it gives off the CO2 that traps the heat, causes global warming. And then you've got another smaller group of countries who are big oil producers saying, we're not sure we like that. And they're very effective. And the trouble is these COPs operate by consensus. And that means that actually just one country can hold things up.
And we're talking about almost 200 countries, aren't we, trying to agree on text? And how can 200 countries agree?
So it's a little bit like, someone said, it's like trying to herd nearly 200 cats, except that a few of those cats actually are panthers, with their own fangs and their own claws and their own agenda. And that's what we're seeing right now. So you've got Saudi, you've got Russia, you've got a number of countries who just say, we're not going to tolerate a conclusion of COP28 that says anything about phasing out fossil fuels. And as you say, the latest draft of the text does not include the words phase out. It says countries could reduce, if they like, production of fossil fuels. So the reaction from small island states, the really vulnerable countries that know that if we cross 1.5, they vanish from the map. It's that serious. So they, the EU, a number of other countries are saying, we're not tolerating this. So right now, there'll be a massive argument going on behind the scenes. And, well, we're coming up to the moment when in theory we should get the next draft. It won't happen that quickly.
No,
it's going to be a difficult
They said they were going to end on time, like the first COP ever to end at 11 a.m. this morning, but it's not happening now, is it?
No, this is my 12th. They never end on time.
No, they don't. Alhassan, coming to you. What do we do about this? 200 countries trying to agree on phasing out fossil fuels, but of course some countries don't want to because their infrastructure, their whole country, their profit relies on it. So what do we do?
I think it's a very good question, and it's also tricky because on the one hand, as you said, you have countries whose economies are built on producing oil, at least at the moment, and you have countries that are also consuming a lot of oil. So I think we should phase out fossil fuels. I don't want to preach to the choir. I don't think that's something that's debatable. Nonetheless, how fast we do it is something that we should discuss. And for me, actually, what's more important is discussing how much other countries are consuming oil, because you won't have to sell oil if there's no one to buy it, right? So I would actually want to see targets and demands from countries consuming the most amount of oil reducing that demand and that consumption, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, reduction, when we're always talking about net zero, you know, in this day and age, about reducing your emissions as much as possible, it's about reduction first and foremost. Nikita, coming to you, who's relatively new to this climate change world, is it as simple as they have to be phased out? You know, I mean, are you kind of sat here thinking, why is this up for discussion? Like, if you know, there's so much negotiation going on, but it's like, well, no, it obviously should happen. What's your view?
Well, I completely agree with what Alhassan said about supply and demand. If there is obviously we cannot have no demand, but if we have control over the demand, we can then think about controlling the supply, because there will be countries, there will be organizations who will want to, you know, just earn more money, get there, and expand their businesses. And I think changes start from like the smallest things that we do. For example, I was a part of an event where we were asked to create an advertisement around a brief, and it was about saving energy. And our team came up with the very small idea of just switching the sockets, switching the switches when they leave the room. For example, you plug in a charger, you disconnect it from your laptop, but you don't you know, switch off the socket. And we came up with a very simple tagline: stop it at the socket. So I
Catchy,
think,
like it, Nikita.
Actually, I
Very
really like that.
so
Don't steal
I
it, David.
think, it starts.
I'll give credit.
Okay.
So I think it starts with like the simplest of things, and there are a lot of people like me, like you said, I'm very new to this, and it's like, it's in the smallest things that we can start this action with.
Definitely, and it's about that education at all levels. I could go on a tangent, but I want to come back to consumption, because we all do overconsume, and that's one of the reasons why we're in this mess. But talking of consuming energy, tripling renewable capacity, so tripling the use of wind, solar, and solar, I know, Alhassan, you're very passionate about. Is tripling the renewable capacity we have globally by 2030, is that enough? And is solar the key route to this?
So very
Big
good
question.
Yeah, big question to answer. I don't think tripling it is enough. I think we should do as much as we can, and each country would have a different capacity. I actually think this specific region has so much potential in becoming, again, yet in this century, a powerhouse of the world, producing energy, producing green hydrogen. We could be doing so much for the world, and not just oil. We could be doing so much good and helping the rest of the world become more green. So I would like to see that conversation brought up more often. How can we use the abundance of sun that we have here? How can we use the abundance of land that we have here? Instead of just saying, okay, these countries are producing too much oil. How can we support these countries with R&D, with funding, etc., to produce renewable energy?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is my first time to the UAE. It's very sunny, as we know. Where's all the solar farms?
I mean, it's in a way, there are some out in the desert. I saw one a few days ago, very impressive, and it's great to see that happening. But I've got to confess to being a bit shocked that every roof isn't covered in solar panels. Because we know these things are so cheap now.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time, you know, NASA sent a solar panel to the moon in the 70s with the Apollo missions, and it cost $5 million, one panel. Now you can pick them up for $100. The prices are just falling and falling and falling. So people can do solar without subsidies. And I know a number of businesses in the UK who've just put solar on their roof with no subsidy to save their energy.
And it's not that sunny either, is it?
Not that sunny either. So, I mean, I think if we can get to a state where in almost every country, it's kind of normal for I mean, look at that building there, whatever. You know, every flat roof has solar panels. And I think what a difference it would make. It's affordable. We've crossed a tipping point now on solar.
Yes.
You know,
The green premium has fallen. It's
yeah,
cheaper.
it used to be. It's now the cheapest form of power. So I think, you know, the tripling of renewables is a great thing. I hope it survives in the final text.
Yeah.
But we need to do even more. That's a tripling by 2030. And I think it's very, very achievable.
Yeah.
So let's hope that happens.
Let's hope that stays in, and maybe in a few hours we'll see. We can circle back to this conversation. Now, food I want to touch upon, because this has been quite a big subject, this COP28. There has been billions secured in pledges when it comes to food. But is it enough? what does this mean for the poorer countries? And also, I want to come back to the idea of pledges, David. In your experience, this is your 12th COP. Do pledges mean it actually happens?
Okay, language matters.
Yeah.
Right? There are pledges, there are commitments, there are promises, there are legally signed, endorsed documents, okay? Now, they all carry a different meaning. And actually, none of them mean a country has to do what it signed up to.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go right back to the start of this whole process, 1992, the Rio Earth Summit, the countries of the world signed up to a framework convention, a treaty, to avoid dangerous climate change. And here we are at COP28, emissions are higher than ever, temperatures are rising. So people don't have to do what they say they're going to do. But having said that, I think at least if you've got these statements, it provides a sort of framework for action. It sends a signal out. Oh yeah, look, this is real, this is happening. And it sends a signal to companies, it sends a signal to individuals, to organizations, to NGOs. Yeah, this is the pathway that we want to be on. And some will do it, others won't. Some will say they're going to do it and then don't. Others will definitely crack on. And I think it's the people who can recognize that, yes, there are serious threats from climate impacts. We've only warmed 1.1, 1.3 degrees, and we're heading for higher. But there are also massive opportunities. We've had transitions before.
Yep.
Sail to steam.
Yep.
Horse and carriage to car, right? Now, some people lost, but many people gained. And I think if we can portray this transition as positive, a lot of people will wake up and go, oh, yeah, I've got a good idea for a business or a way of making this work. And I think that's where we need to be. And I think that's why it's so exciting going around this COP.
Yep.
To see so many brilliant ideas, innovations and solutions. And I think the more we can foster that as a sense of opportunity, the more the chance of cracking it.
Absolutely. And I just want to talk about the accountability factor there. We've spoken a lot about wording and, how are countries held to account? What are the implications? Alhassan, should there be, greater financial implications off the back of this COP? What do you think? How do we make sure countries do what they say they're going to?
So I think we need to look at it actually from the perspective of companies, right? Because countries obviously matter. Governments have a lot of impact. But a lot of governments, whether we like it or not, are lobbyists affect them greatly. The stock market is a very important incentive for a lot of politicians. So I think the conversation needs to be around how can we factor in the effect of climate change within the stock market and within valuing companies. And then, in fact, I think the conversation with governments will be so much easier if you solve that puzzle. Because right now we have a very unsustainable way of living and of running our economy. It just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it's expected to just grow. And I don't think it's not even logical.
No.
To just keep producing more and expect companies to do that. So I think there needs to be a conversation about how can we factor in the negative externalities from having higher emissions, having a bad impact on the climate, cutting off forests in the Amazon. That needs to be factored in the new stock price. Once you do that, again, the conversation with governments will be so much easier. And I want us to see more youth working at companies. I want to see more companies having youth councils where youth are asking for these things to be affected. So actually walking around the Blue Zone, there are so many activists that have really interesting ideas, that have so much energy, and I'm like, we need to give them jobs. Like, you need to be a corporates. It's good that you're here as well, but you need to be a corporates affecting change. And I would love to see companies do that.
It's such a powerful idea. A friend of mine of my generation is the boss of a big consultancy. And they'd been dabbling with some work with some fossil fuel companies, and Extinction Rebellion turned up at their office. And my friend was like, it's so disruptive and so annoying. And then he suddenly realized that all his young staff were down on the street engaging in a really detailed set of conversations about the science, about the solutions, about the way forward. And that for him was a turning point. Like, if I don't do the right thing as a corporate leader, I'm going to lose staff, I won't attract staff. And I think, Alhassan, you've really hit on something powerful here. that it's internal that's going to see change.
And it sounds so simple when you put it like that as well, Hassan. Nikita, you're the youngest on this panel. You are Gen Z. I mean, we all know that the younger generation cares more about climate change, but do you see a lot of your friends wanting to go into it? And do you think this COP inspires youth, or that's not what inspires?
I'll start by actually sharing a conversation I had with Anna from PwC. I was interviewing her, and she shared this, that they did a research and found that people who were in their mid-40s, 50s were more concerned about climate change, but we see more youth acting on it because they have more resources. We live in the digital age,
Yep.
and that's a very powerful tool if used correctly. And so, yeah, I do feel that the youth can actually now make a difference, and we have leaders to guide us as well. And I've met so many young people here. I've interviewed so many young people on the panels and the workshops, and they had so much to say. So, yeah, I do think that youth can actually bring a change.
Can I ask you, David? You've been to 12 of these. You probably weren't 21 when you started coming to them. COP. I mean, is this how we get the youth more involved?
Well, the COPs, they're the only forum the world has to tackle this together. Mm-hmm. So when people say, oh, they don't deliver, they don't really work, which is true, they move at a very, very slow pace, because if one country, as we discussed, has a problem, the whole thing grinds to a halt. But they're all we've got. Mm-hmm. So I think they do serve a purpose. If only to provide an annual focus on the topic, where NGOs, where corporates, where all kinds of people can gather and exchange ideas. And I think more than at any other venue I've been to, mm-hmm. year after year, this is where ideas get exchanged. This is where people who wouldn't normally meet. I mean, I've just in the last 10 days been involved in events where you've had NGOs sitting around a table with scientists and with corporates, and in a way that just wouldn't happen anywhere else. Mm-hmm. So there's value in that. And you see people hearing something and making a little note, or having a little conversation afterwards and swapping a card, or a QR code. I have QR codes. I don't have cards anymore.
Oh, you have come into the digital age. Okay, I agree to an extent, but do we all need to fly halfway across the world to be able to make that happen? Do we make it a more digital COP? Do we have things more online? Nikita, what do you think? I mean, this is being live streamed, isn't it? That's where we've got most of our viewers today. Is that the future of COP?
I do think so, because I did meet people who shared their experiences, and they said that it's so difficult for countries who don't have the right resources to travel to, stay here for 10 days. There's food, there's hotels, of course. So they have a lot of resources. If they have a lot of resources, then it's fine. But if they don't, then they miss out on a huge chance to, find a stage to give a voice to their causes. So yes, I think digitally we can reach to more people. And yes, COP happens annually, like once. Maybe if we do it a little bit more frequently, maybe on a smaller scale, and reach out to countries that are not easily accessible, that would help.
Alhassan, how about, okay, so the general COP, right, it definitely serves a purpose in the fact that I've met so many people this last couple of weeks, had conversations I wouldn't otherwise had. Even if they're from the UK, we're having them here. Wild, but there we go. That's what happens, isn't it? And it is a moment, right? Even if you're not interested in climate change, you kind of know what COP is. What about, Alhassan, if we had, country-specific COPs that also happen, so that, India had its own climate change conference per year, and then you're not flying all the way around the world, and then just select people come together for an international COP. What do you think about that?
Great question. So I think we actually need to have both. As controversial as that sounds. I think, so a challenge that I've seen with this COP and with last year's COP, sitting in on the negotiations, that a lot of countries, you kind of have to come to COP prepared, and you have to have your text ready, you have to have your arguments ready, etc. So I think that needs to happen before COP, and there needs to be convenings to prepare for that. Nonetheless, a COP, I think a global forum is so important. And I know before I started attending COPs, I was like, yeah, why is everyone flying in for what seems like a photo op or what seems like a speaking opportunity? But as you said, David, like there are so many synergies that happen here that wouldn't happen anywhere else.
Yeah.
And honestly, if it was for me, I would have 2 COPs a year.
2 COPs a year, yeah?
Yeah, not necessarily as big as this one, not
Yeah.
necessarily as global, but we need to also have a conversation around how can we make COP more sustainable.
Yes.
So I think we need to have at least a commitment. If someone flies in here, they attend the whole 2 weeks.
Interesting.
I've met
Yep.
a lot of people that are great and they're change makers, but they come in for 2 days for like one speaking opportunity and then they leave. But there's actually a lot of missed opportunity there where, again, you can meet people, you can have interesting ideas that you exchange with others, you can make deals here.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have a commitment from people on that front.
Well, there's definitely some wins from COP that you've mentioned there. Anything else that's been a win from your perspective, David, whether that be from the loss and damage that was agreed on day one, $700 million. Not enough there.
Not
but
remotely
no.
enough, but I mean, that was a shot in the arm, and it's it's great that you brought that up because, you know, COP after COP, the most vulnerable nations said, we're getting hammered by climate change caused by you rich nations, and we need some mechanism that addresses that. And there was a wonderful Bangladeshi scientist, Salimul Haq, who for year after year would press this argument. And he was shouted down, and everybody said it's never going to work. And then gradually it kind of gained momentum. And just before this COP, when it looked like it was going to land, Salimul died. And it was a real blow to the whole loss and damage movement. And so it's fantastic to see how sort of in his honor, on day one, this was agreed. Now, there's not nearly enough money in it, but it is a start. The principle's been established that if a poor nation gets hit by a typhoon, or like Pakistan, a third of it was
Floods.
flooded last year, right? Now, at last now, there's a kind of mechanism. The diplomats don't want to use compensation as a word, but that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, rich nations, you've been polluting for longest, put some money into this fund that can enable the poor countries to rebuild or make themselves more resilient to the next climate extreme, which we know is going to happen. So I think that is a success. Whatever comes out of this final few hours or the next 24 hours about fossil fuels or whatever, getting that fund established, I think is valuable.
Yeah, and that was the big news from last COP, wasn't it? But it kind of it takes a while to get more money in the pot and get more countries agreeing. Alhassan, what's been a win from your perspective of this COP? What's been a positive?
Many. I think, and again, back to the point about the need to have in-person COPs, there's been so much activism at this COP, it's blown me out of my mind. I think the fact that more people are speaking, not just for loss and damage, but also for fairness and justice around the world is huge. You cannot have been in the blue zone at the COP without knowing that, you know, we need to have more peace in the world, we need to have a ceasefire. And I did not even mean to mention that, but I actually just, one of my really good friends lost his cousin last night in a drone attack while she was sitting in her apartment. So I'm really glad this COP brought light not just to climate activism and climate justice, but you cannot have climate justice without having human justice. So,
Yeah, more peace. Yeah. Nikita, what's been a win at this COP from your perspective?
Well, it was my first COP, but it was really heartening to see so many people from different areas of the world, even some of them from like remote areas. We've hosted some of them with our local series as well. And it was a completely different experience. And we saw people who did not know each other before, then come here, talk about the same causes and connect. And maybe they will end up helping each other in some way or another. So I think it's a great platform to bring people who would usually not meet. I mean, it is 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it's still 1 step forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I come in on
Yeah,
it? It's
please.
a great point, Nikita. It really is. It's so valuable, and it makes me think back to my first COP, COP11, 2005 in Montreal. There were environment ministers, environmental NGOs, environment journalists. I don't remember anyone else there. I don't remember indigenous people being invited to share their wisdom about all this. I don't remember any corporates saying that they were going to take part. There were so many important sectors of society and the economy who weren't present. at this vital process. And I remember thinking, how are we ever going to deliver action on climate change if it's just people with the word environment in their job title? So I think broadening and deepening the dialogue is absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, in the past 10 days, I've seen so many people from the Amazonian regions, all the indigenous people and their culture, things I was not even aware of are part of this world. And it was so good to see them coming together, sharing each other's cultures, enjoying with each other. I mean, we have a team which is, multicultural. We have people from all over the world, and this is the first time we've met each other after working for 6 months together. So yeah, it was really great.
And going back to your point, David, it was pretty exclusive before, wasn't it? But this COP, I mean, I've lived in the green zone here at Extreme Hangout, and the amount of events, music, workshops, panels that have gone on and sparked conversation has just been exceptional. And that's what I've been here for, and that's what I've lived for. And that's what I think has been so important about COP. And my win has been not the negotiations, not what's going to come out in that final text, but it's all the other things that are going on. Those are the positives that I'm taking. But there's also, there's more that can be done, because we could have more people here, couldn't we? I mean, is the message still getting further? What more could have been done at COP from your perspective?
Okay, so, I mean, the more people thing, I mean, what did we hit, 100,000 registered? At times, it was a little bit creaky. Let's be honest. I mean, just the sheer number. And I think there was a slight risk of dilution, because so many organizations represented here wanted to put on their own events, which is a good thing. But it did mean that actually people were chasing the same guests, contributors. And I think going forward, a little bit more focus would possibly help.
And alignment, maybe from
maybe
the top,
alignment.
Condense,
But yeah, I think this COP raised and focused attention on subjects that just didn't get the attention they deserved before. The one that's close to my heart is health. So we had the first health day. I was involved in discussions at the last COP about trying to persuade the UAE, the COP28 hosts, to have a health day. And we were delighted that they listened. And so that was, I think, a win. And you had health ministers coming. I mean, it's astonishing, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it, human health is really the face of climate change. I talked to the Minister of Health for Uganda a few days back, and she said everything about climate change, all those impacts, ends up as a human health problem. With spread of disease, whether it's flooding, whether it's drought, all of these issues, high temperatures, inability to work outdoors, it's all a human health question. So I think that's a win. To have the health day, health ministers come in, a big health declaration. I think it'll be on the agenda, I'm sure, for COP29. Definitely the Brazilians are keen for COP30. So this agenda will build, and I think it'll help focus minds in a different way. And just in terms of narrative power, for people who don't understand 1.5 or greenhouse gas emissions or all of that language, mitigation, adaptation, all of that stuff, they do understand it's too hot to work outdoors. And I think if that message starts to come through more, we'll get another tipping point.
Because a healthy planet really does mean a healthy body and a healthy humankind as well. And the more we connect with nature and the world around us and look to protect it, the more we will start protecting the planet. Absolutely. Alhassan, I want to come to you on this. What has been the missed opportunity at COP from your perspective?
I think, so the whole format of COP needs to be rethought. So you have all these.
By the way, I love that kind of radical thinking.
Oh, I know.
No, that's great. If I had a notebook, I'd make some notes.
He's pithy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Thank you, but seriously, we cannot have some of the smartest people come from each single country, and not be able to reach a consensus on the last day. So there are two things that need to be rethought. One, how the negotiations are run. We need to have more youth leading delegations. That's currently the case in some countries, but not most. We need to have more youth moderating the conversation as well.
How do we get that to happen, though?
Well, we need to talk to the UNFCCC.
We'll get a meeting in. David, sort us out.
Well, there is a process, actually. Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a movement of sort of young climate leaders who were attached to national delegations. And I think that's a way forward and might help answer that whole point.
100%. And the other thing is, I've seen, so we have a lot of diversity at COP, but there are a lot of echo chambers. So you get so many people from the same background having the same conversations. I was walking around the Blue Zone this past week, and you see a lot of Egyptians talking, a lot of Nigerians talking, a lot of Brits talking. And we need to have more conversations, not just inside the negotiations, but outside in social events, promoting this discourse that, okay, we need to work together. What happens right now is that you have people kind of separated, and then they get inside the negotiations and fight. You don't want that.
Yeah.
So I think we need to just think earlier. Okay, we have 1,000, 2,000, 80,000 delegates. How can we make sure that people from different groups are having conversations together, not just inside the negotiations, but also the side events?
Absolutely. I mean, you've said you've laid down the gauntlet on a few things today, Alhassan. But Nikita, I want to come to you. It's your first COP.
Yeah.
What do you think could have been done better? What was a missed opportunity?
We've been here for 10 days, and we've had some amazing speakers, talented people taking workshops, and I think we still did not have enough audience with us. We have this huge space, and people just come here, they feel relaxed, and they can have meaningful conversations, but we're not even on the website of COP. So I think that is a missed opportunity. And we have people coming in to see us, and they tell us that, oh, we didn't even know you existed. We were the Blue Zone for so many days, and they tell us that we wish we had known you were here, we would have come here sooner. So yeah, I think
it's that joined up communication. There's so much going on at COP, but what is the central, like how are we getting this message out? Where is the one point you can go to about what is going on and who can go to what? And the general public, where are they? They can access all of this easily, free of charge. We go on that. I've got a couple more questions before we're going to go to some audience questions. I want to ask, we kind of touched upon, like, if it wasn't COP, could we go down a digital age? Do we have national versions? But ultimately, is there hope after this COP? Do you feel hopeful? Has it been a letdown, or are we going in the right direction?
Ask the young people first.
Nikita, I'm going to come to you.
I do feel it's hopeful. I'm not talking about the bigger picture, the COP. I'm talking about the local events that we do.
Yeah.
Last night, I met a guy in my hotel, and me and my colleague, we were talking to him, and he was from the Pacific Island regions, Samoa, and he mentioned that he was not able to reach the right audience to share his thoughts, his opinions. And I mean, he shared this story. He told me that, if you see from the end of that stage to where we're sitting, that's the width of the land area they have. It's 20 kilometers in length, but that's the width, and they have water on both the sides. So when it's like rainy seasons and all, they just flood the land area. And I mean, I can't even imagine living in those conditions, and they cannot grow anything because obviously it's salt water. And yeah, so we just got to talking, and he was so interested in hosting a local hangout, because I think even he realized that that was much easily accessible to them, because it's very difficult to come to Dubai. But if we help them with the funding, if we can help them with the organization, maybe they can host a local event at their own place with their own people and, spread more awareness.
Yep, spread the word, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all about communication. We need to spread the message. Alhassan, what about you? What do you think? Is there hope going forward after this COP?
I think the only way out of this is hope. We need to be really positive, and what gives me hope is that I attended last COP and saw a lot of activists that were just leading protests, not just leading protests, they were leading protests and campaigning, and I see some of them as youth delegates this year. I saw Mitzi, who spoke at the very first panel on this stage, speak at the plenary in front of a lot of people, in front of the COP27, 26, and 28 high-level champions. So that gives me hope that the people who are leading conversations are, kind of making their way up from activism to the stage.
Yeah.
Which is obviously also another form of activism. But yeah, that gives me a lot of hope, and I think we just need to hold countries more accountable. Ultimately, that's the way out of this in a concrete manner. Yeah.
David, I'm going to come to you last, but I also want to ask, Extreme Hangout, it's all about popularizing the climate crisis and movement and activism. How do we get more people? I mean, this whole conversation has been underlined by the fact that we need youth more involved and leading different aspects of climate change and climate action. But how do we do that? And is there hope there?
Well, I mean, I think absolutely critical to all of this is education. And that's education for young people, for children, right through to corporate leaders. I mean, you know, one good thing is more and more people and organizations are involved, but I'm also quite shocked by the low level of understanding
Yes.
among so many people. They might understand the broad principle of global warming, but they don't really understand what it actually means. So for me, it's about sharing highly pragmatic solutions. You know, I think we're too late now for sort of, you know, Greta talked about blah, blah, blah. You know, so for example, I was on moderating a panel about what can the healthcare sector do faced with extreme weather. And an amazing woman from Kerala described how in 2018 there'd been these devastating floods that had flooded, among other things, the hospitals. And typically in a hospital, your most valuable equipment and maybe your most critically injured patients are on the ground floor. And they did an amazing job of recovering after the floods. And within a couple of years had decided, just within that one state, that they would find the money and crack on with building a new top floor for health centers, for hospitals, for clinics. And that top floor would have the X-ray machine. It would have the intensive care patients. They would move up, they would have the backup generator. So that when 2 or 3 years later there was another flood, the ground floors got flooded, but the operation of the hospitals could continue. Now, when this fantastic advocate described that process, and she'd been involved in organizing it, the room fell quiet. And people thought, well, actually, we can do that wherever we're from, or we can fund it, or we can organize it, or we can help with consultancy about it. And, you know, that for me is a win. If the penny drops with a really, really useful idea that will save lives and keep the foundation stone of a society running, namely the health system. And I think the more we can do that, and maybe excite people with that kind of thing. People might say, oh, that's a bit boring, a new floor on a hospital, but actually there must be a way of explaining it. So that for me is the way forward.
Okay, well, youth, education, alignment, key things that have come out of this. But just before we go to questions, I want to ask each of you one word to sum up COP28 here in Dubai. Alhassan, you first.
If you're starting with me.
Yep.
Uniting, I think that's the word.
United.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nikita.
I would say transformative. Maybe not for everyone, but like I do feel that, yeah, it was transformative for some.
Amazing.
Yeah.
David.
I'm going to be the Christmas Grinch. Oil.
Oh, okay. United, transformative, oil. Make of that what you will. I will now open it up to any questions from our guests here today. Would anyone like to ask the panel any questions at all?
Hello. Hi, my name is Nuran, and I am 13 years old. I wanted to ask about how I understand that we are all about the younger generation, but the younger half of our generation is usually forgotten. We don't have that many opportunities as the high school students, for example. And do you have a way that we can incorporate really, really young people as of like middle schoolers? Mm-hmm. Are there anything that we can volunteer in or any things that we can attend to learn more about climate change?
Amazing. Well, Nuran, 13, my goodness, things are looking hopeful.
I wouldn't have dared ask a question at 13. I think that's fantastic.
I know, unbelievable. Alhassan, I see you smiling there. I mean, what do you say? How can 11, 12, 13-year-olds get involved? What can they do?
So you definitely have a valid point. I'm 29 now, but I don't know if you were here for the beginning, but when I was 9, someone snuck me into a conference. And that's how I kind of got into this space. I think we need to do a lot of work on making this conference more accessible.
Yeah.
For example, the Blue Zone, where all these negotiations happen was extremely inaccessible this year. It was very difficult to get badges. I work for a large corporation, and we had to scramble for badges. I personally had to email 1,700 NGOs, just asking if any of them had a badge. And that's how I landed mine. So I think there needs to be a discussion both at the leadership, okay, how do we involve more youth, especially younger youth? And at the same time, how can we open this space? So different venues on inside COP, inside the green zone, how can we make them more accessible for example, for youth to volunteer? Extreme Hangout is a great place to volunteer, by the way.
But what about kind of, when COP's not on, Nikita, what can people get involved in at the age of 11, 12, 13 to actually make a difference? And because their voice is so valid and they can be so powerful, and I think often we don't think that the youth can do much, but I tell you what, I'd much rather have Nuran join me on several pieces of work than maybe, a 60-year-old director, for example. They're more passionate, You're welcome too, some of you. No,
what about a 65-year-old ex-journalist?
You're all right, David, too.
Okay.
Yeah, you can come. But how can they get involved? What have you seen that's possible?
So I think we were talking about Gen Z, but what she's talking about is now Gen Alpha,
Yes.
one step ahead. And I feel that it starts at home, but also with education. Just like you said, education is very important. We can have events at school, we can have clubs, societies at school working towards it, and we can have teachers and even the family members. Like, if everyone is guiding these children towards one thing, it can really help. I mean, we live in the digital age, as I just said, but yeah, I think social media is one of the most powerful tools to reach these children, and education is another one.
And, part of the education system, we should be doing more in schools around it. And also, what about younger work placements? There's so much value that can come from that, surely. And what about the BBC, David?
Yeah, well, I mean, the BBC in its own way, rather lumbering way sometimes, tries to encourage people and provide information as much as possible. But in response to your question, I'm thinking of the city of Hull, big industrial city in northeast England, where I've been doing some work to help it become net zero. And it's in Britain's biggest carbon-emitting region, so it's a really tough challenge. And one of the most amazing elements of this is that all of the secondary schools in Hull have signed up to a program where they share material, they share speakers, they share ideas, so that the students can be involved in climate clubs, in local actions, in all kinds of projects, and they get the chance periodically to address business leaders in that city. People running big businesses and small. And I've moderated events there, actually very powerful, when you get a 14-year-old standing up and asking a brilliant question to the boss of some multinational company. That's what we need more of. But the starting point, I think, for that, I never heard of alpha before, but anyway, congratulations, that's brilliant. So, that ages me, doesn't it? Anyway.
I haven't either, so...
Okay, oh, fine, that's okay. I think at school is the way to go. Find a sympathetic teacher, get local groups going, local societies, local clubs, agitate for connections with the people, the big employers in your area. Say, can we come in?
Yeah.
Can a group of you come in and talk about climate?
I was going to say, Nuran, we're waiting on a lot of things, I think, in this world. Like, I think, you've got the passion. You can start something yourself as well. This is your permission. This is your opportunity. You've got the voice. Like, so if you want to create your own group and go around and do education at different organizations or train speakers or just empower one another, then do it. The time is now, and you've got nothing to lose.
And by the way, you've got 4 allies sitting up here, so get in touch. We'll help.
Absolutely, absolutely. All the speakers will be very happy to talk further after today.
To that
Yes, please,
point,
keep it.
can I?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, can I just add a point? Thank you. Do connect with people. That's a
Yes.
really, really good point. Whether we like it or not, a lot of these spaces, not just in climate activism, are kind of, okay, who knows who and who can invite me to X, Y, Z. So try to connect with people. Try to meet activists here, and they'll probably be able to pull you in on some work to at least start with.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to start those conversations or to start something for fear of any sort of failure, because even just starting is absolutely the way to go. I mean, Amber sitting here, she's a founding member of Extreme Hangout. You're always nervous when these things start, but starting is the most important thing. Yes, please, next question.
Amber, I think you recognize me. I was here. This is my second day here. I agree with you. I'm a teacher. I have come back this. I just visited one place. Again, the same question. What are you doing for the kids to understand what is climate? So luckily, I just went into climate finance, where FAB was doing something good about understanding corals. I fully agree with you that our classroom has dry textbooks and teachers who are not passionate about actual teaching. It's just textbook, exam. There should be action taking place in the classroom. If we have one smart kid like this forcing the teacher to take action, I think teachers will be smart. And I fully agree that, you have biolabs, physics lab and all. There should be something called Earth Lab, where kids from kindergarten to high school come and just experience what is Earth. People like you from Extreme Hangouts go to school and conduct, educate the kids when they are small. Only then you can have reasonable adults. Otherwise, you're done.
Definitely. You can only have reasonable adults if you're educated when you're small. Are you a reasonable adult, David?
Well, I like to think, I've got to admit, I was quite late to the party. Right? When I started reporting on this for the BBC, I was quite cynical.
Yep.
Could it really be that bad, the thing about the corals and the rainforest and the whatever? And then I went round with a cameraman and we filmed the Arctic melting. And I've seen with my own eyes the ice retreat. The Amazon, I've seen the rainforest being hacked down in vast areas. So I became convinced very, very rapidly that we're doing a brilliant job of trashing the planet, but that also we now know how to deal with it. The solutions, the technologies, the ideas are there to really help us turn this round. And one of the keys to doing that is sitting right there, age 13. That's what it comes down to.
Any other questions before we wrap up today? Ooh.
So a quick one on, I guess, everyone here at COP is very pro-climate or trying to do positive things, or the vast majority of people, they're sort of very clued in. But then you can look to future sort of elections in America, for example, and it's looking like sort of opinions on climate or taking action are plummeting, and you might have a president who takes America back out of the Paris Agreement. How do you bring on board people who are very anti or not particularly interested and aren't the sort of people who are going to be likely here to be activists or campaigners?
Great question, because we are talking in a way in an echo chamber here, right? We all want better for the planet. David, you worked at the BBC for a very long time. Often what you were reporting on was going to people who didn't really care, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think one of the tipping points that we're in the process of crossing, I mentioned the price of solar panels coming right down now. And I think when people can make decisions like putting panels on their roof or buying an electric car, there's one on sale in China for $10,000, right? So when things become financially sensible and people engage with that, it doesn't matter about climate change, whether they think it's important or not. I filmed in Texas. Texas is the big oil state, right?
Yep.
It's also the big wind state. And I interviewed the mayor of a town which is just surrounded by enormous wind farms. And I said, gosh, what you're doing here, it's a kind of environmental dream, tackling climate change. He said, don't mention climate change. It's just business. And I think that's really important. A way of getting out of the echo chamber, all kinds of people who are perhaps never going to care about climate change for whatever reason. But they are going to care if they can run their business more cheaply, if they can run their home more cheaply, just because there's technology available for them. And I think that's a really significant moment that we're now witnessing. So I think that's a source of hope.
And for me personally, we need to make it cool, right?
Yep.
We need to make it cooler than not doing it, right? And you don't need to use words like we said earlier. Lots of people are they don't know maybe what 1.5 means, what the Paris Agreement is, what sustainability even means. But if you break that down and actually you just you just make it cooler than what was there before. You add some spice, and you use the power of athletes or the power of people with influence to make it the done thing and to get people on the bandwagon without them even knowing they're on the climate bandwagon. Surely that's a way as well.
Well, so, you know, when Taylor Swift had that the concert in Rio. And
Massive Swiftie.
Okay,
Go, Taylor.
there you go. So, you know, the temperature in the venue was nudging 60. And people were fainting. And in fact, one poor young woman was taken to hospital and died, right? The human body can't cope with 60. And she cancelled the gig, and she wrote a little note saying, really regret this, so sorry, because of extreme temperatures. And I thought, what a terrible pity. She just didn't put in another little line linking it to climate change. You know, extreme temperatures of the kind we're going to get more of unless we take the right action.
Yeah.
Right? And now, I don't know who's in touch with Taylor Swift.
I'll try.
I'm not really on her Christmas card list, but, you know, if you can just tweak her messaging and those with her kind of reach, that's very powerful.
Absolutely. Alhassan, you were going to come in there.
Great point, David. To your question, though, about presidents changing, I think we really need to rethink the way countries agree to things. I mean, you cannot just agree to something and then because a different person took power, they can just, you know, excuse themselves from the agreement they made 2-3 years ago. That's one. Two, and this is a question for you all to kind of ponder on. I cannot answer it here. We have a leadership crisis in a lot of countries. I'm seeing a lot of countries, especially in the West, where, and in the world in general, where you're given options, but you're given bad options. And you have to pick the worst of two. I used to live in Argentina, and we just had a president called Milei who just took power and is about to reverse a lot of the democratic progress that Argentina made. So this is, again, a question for you. How can we address this leadership crisis? How can we as citizens address this? Because this is linked to climate change. You know, the two things are not separate at all.
Absolutely. Nikita, from your perspective, how do we get the average person who just goes about their normal life, who doesn't really think that climate matters to them or impacts them, how do we get them to take note?
I think it's, again, it's about influencing people in the right way. Obviously, people have power to influence celebrities, politicians, huge companies. We see companies who claim to be greenwashing but are not. We see companies who are actually doing the good work as well. I think it will take time to reach the right people. So it's a slow process, but it's easy to say that, you know, it's slow. I mean, you can just sit with it and just complain, or you can start doing it. And just like you said, that Taylor Swift could have mentioned, like with just one sentence, she could have actually influenced so many people. And we see concerts where people are now, you know, doing things in a more sustainable way. And I work in marketing. I've written posts about, you know, some bands, some musicians who have done this. And we have had some positive comments from the followers, their fans. And yeah, it's...
Goodness me, we could carry on for a long time, but I want to thank everyone here for their questions, for their time, for joining us for this discussion on the official final day of COP. Panelists, Nikita, Alhassan, David, thank you so much for joining me, being here at the Extreme Hangout stage today. I mean, there's been music, there's been film, there's been activism, there's been negotiations, there's been supermodels, there's been royalty. There has been almost everything at this COP and at this Extreme Hangout. Thank you all for being part of it. Let's keep doing what we're doing, spreading the message, and hopefully we are on for a brighter future. So we really have discussed everything when it comes to COP and all that goes in between. So thank you for today, and thank you for being with us, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.